R.A.'s life is about much more than baseball. It is a story of second chances. Second chances as a pitcher, a husband and a father, and a Christian.
You might know him as the first knuckleballer to win a Cy Young Award. The former Braves pitcher spoke to over 100 local athletes.
The baseball stuff was interesting, but it never was the end game.
This is not an ode to New York Mets fans all over the world to come read about this unbelievable ending to a career. This is different.
If it wasn't for that, we wouldn't be talking. I probably wouldn't be here.
He reveals a dark childhood secret of abuse.
Anytime you put yourself out there like that, you run a risk.
I was done. I was out. And I thought, this is how it's going to end. Somebody's going to have to call my wife and tell her that her husband died in the Missouri River.
I didn't feel like there was much to look forward to.
My life was saved on that day by the Lord, thankfully.
Every day I want to be who God has authentically called me to be.
In a society that want to criticize masculinity, I don't think there's anything more masculine than being vulnerable, being honest, and being faithful in God.
We the people. Why you quiet? It's time to stand up for the truth. And they coming for our kids, so who gon' stand up for the youth? Ay, and we know we win because Yeshua is the proof. Ay, we the people like Garcia, so that's no excuse.
R.A. Dickey played Major League Baseball for the Texas Rangers, Seattle Mariners, Minnesota Twins, New York Mets, Toronto Blue Jays, and Atlanta Braves. After limited success in the MLB as a conventional pitcher, he learned to throw the knuckleball. In 2012, Dickey was selected to his first All-Star game and became the first knuckleballer to win the Cy Young Award, given to the best pitcher in baseball. But wow, was it a long, winding road to get to this point. R.A. walks through his entire life and career in his book, Wherever I Wind Up, which will be the focus of our conversation today. R.A.'s life is about much more than baseball, though. It is a story of second chances. Second chances as a pitcher, a husband and a father, and a Christian. His story underscores the transformative power of second chances, illustrating how adversity can be a catalyst for growth and redemption. His journey from personal triumph to professional triumph serves as an inspiring example of resilience and faith in the face of life's challenges. We can all relate in some way, and we'll learn so much from this conversation. R.A., thanks for joining us, man.
Oh, man, I appreciate that. That's a sweet introduction.
Our good friend Chris Barnwell wrote that, so all to him. We're gonna obviously focus on your story, but to make it relatable to our audience, I think I'd sort of walk through one of my life examples, because second chances are something that everyone gets a chance at, whether it's immense adversity or just, a small second chance, but they're all things we're going to have to face in our life, and sort of where we go in those situations will kind of determine our fate beyond that. And, my story, I've had a lot of second chances in life, but the one that kind of rings most true to me is, I went away to play college football at a Division I school. I sort of had all the right values. I was raised in a very good home, but I didn't have my priorities straight, and they got all sort of discombobulated there, and it led to me failing out. And it was a dark time in my life. And, it was that first conversation with your parents where they're not mad, they're disappointed. And you see your dad sort of go through some emotions that, you've never seen him go through before. And you felt all the weight of the world and the responsibility for that. And, it's that taste in my mouth that I still think about to this day that sort of gets me through adversity now, and being able to go back and relate to that. I mean, the story has a wonderful ending. I ended up transferring to another school. Had I never failed out of that college, I wouldn't have gone to the other one. Met my wife, who I've been married to for 14 years. Greatest thing that ever happened to me. My college experience at my second college is actually what led me to sort of discover the Catholic faith and convert to that later in life. So it was a wonderful experience in the end for me, but going through it, nobody, including myself and those around me, sort of knew what the end of that story was. You've had second chances in life, and yours are sort of on a level that not many people experience, and the book kind of gets into that. So I'd like to sort of start there with the book. It seems like the book to you was almost therapeutic. I mean, it almost feels like you're sort of working through some things as you write this book. You were sexually abused at 8, at 13, again as a teenager. You had an extramarital career. You had this wild baseball career that should have been over many, many times. Was writing the book therapeutic? I mean, I guess the question I'm getting at is, why did you write the book?
Well, I think the number one reason I wrote it was I felt like it was a real calling from God. I mean, I didn't want to. I mean, to be honest, I fought it for a while. I mean, I remember being in Tacoma, Washington, as part of the AAA squad for the Seattle Mariners, and sitting down to write it as an act of obedience, and just couldn't get through it. Like, it was too hard. And that was in 2000 and golly, that was in 2008. And so there were multiple times along the journey where I thought, I had something that God wanted me to say, and he had given me a unique story. But for whatever reason, the timing wasn't right. And so I fought it. I pushed back against it for a long time until finally, I felt like I had done enough work and counseling and with my family, and I felt grounded enough to be able to enter into something that was going to be a real raw and vulnerable experience. And so I did, and that I started writing. I started writing that book in seventh grade, really, because I kept a bunch of diaries. I tell people all the time, my outlet when I wasn't going good for a long time was, I'd write. I love the written word. I always have. I'm a big reader, and was an English major in college, and always had done diaries. I mean, I went back to some of those diaries when I started talking about my sexual abuse in the book, and reflected on some of those pages. So it was very real. And so to relive that over and over again was a real difficult thing. But yes, it was therapeutic in a lot of regards. But I had done a lot of the work before that, so I was opening up some wounds, but I'd already done the work to be able to handle those wounds in a way that I felt like could be productive for not only me, but for the audience that would be reading or exposed to the book.
And those a lot of those diary entries are actually in the book. You start and
Yeah.
finish chapters with some of those examples, and you say the date when you wrote them, where you were when you wrote them. You use a couple words there, raw and vulnerable. I mean, this is not the typical sports memoir. You sort of look like the prototypical baseball player on the cover, and if you're walking by in a Barnes and Noble, it's probably going to be in the sports section. But this is not an ode to New York Mets fans all over the world to come read about this unbelievable ending to a career. This is different. Did you worry about being, and your vulnerability is on a 10 out of 10 level there. And I think as a man, for other men and this sort of masculinity culture that's currently being talked about in this country, vulnerability is something that we all need to be comfortable with. And I think it's something that truly apparently helped you through all this process. Did you worry though what people were gonna think about you or judge you? I sort of what struck out to me about reading your book, it felt like going to confession. It's you're worried what it's intimidating. It's scary. You're worried about if is the priest gonna judge you, but every time I walk out of confession, I just sort of have this like big sigh of relief that, oh my gosh, it's out there. Everything's better now. Did you worry about what people were gonna think about you?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think, the truth is I was in my car the first day of spring training. The excerpts in Sports Illustrated were out from the book. And I knew that everybody in that clubhouse had read them. And I was walking in to a clubhouse where people were going to know the real me, in a way that they never had before, in a very intimate way. And, I was in tears. Like, I was scared to death. I was afraid. Uh, I just was very, I felt like I've been scraped, like I was just raw and emotive and all of that. And, I walked in to that clubhouse, and, you know, one of the guys that came up to me right away was David Wright. And David Wright said, "Hey man, I just want to say I appreciate, you being vulnerable, to use your word, in a way that, was moving." And that for me was like a deep breath, like, okay, although I wanted to try to position myself as this man who doesn't give a crap what people think, I think there's something inherent in all of us, um, because especially if you're a believer, you care about other people, you care about how they behave, what they say, how they act. Now, there are boundaries within that care that are very important to have, but at the same time, I did want to have a good platform, and I felt like God, with the book, was trying to give me a platform to be able to broadcast those things that were most meaningful in life. And so it was never meant to be a baseball book. Now, baseball was the kind of the conduit, if you will, to kind of move through the landscape of my faith and the things that had happened to me and happened to millions of other people out there that I was sharing about. But it never, and it was interesting. The baseball stuff was interesting, but it never was the end game. Like, I didn't want people leaving, reading the book thing, oh, great, he conquered his demons and won a Cy Young. Like that was not the motive of the book at all. It was much more to try to relate a story that people could grow from and get better from and have hope, most of all have hope from.
Yeah, hope's so powerful, and it's funny, like, you're the only pitcher ever to win a Cy Young throwing the knuckleball. I mean, you're one of one. There's only been one to ever do it, and so picking up the book now, we have a mutual friend, and I sorta knew the story I was getting into, but still knowing that going in and kinda knowing the end of the story, you actually spend next to no time talking about your Cy Young award. I mean, you could almost go through the book and sort of pass it over without realizing it. It's not about that. It's how it finishes, but it's everything that leads up to it. So I want to sort of now get into the baseball career, and I want to start in this interesting place. I mean, we could sort of like not laugh at it, but sort of make light of it now. But the most important thing in a pitcher's body is his ulnar collateral ligament. Everybody knows the term Tommy John surgery. Tommy John surgery is to fix the ulnar collateral ligament in your arm. We often hear about pitchers now getting Tommy John surgery when they barely need it because they're coming back better from it. People that watch these episodes on YouTube will notice that in the last few episodes, I've had a big cast on my arm. I've had both of my lateral collateral ligaments replaced in the last 3 years. Never thrown a baseball since my sophomore year of high school, but I can relate to how big a deal that is. The way they found out about yours is unbelievable. So, and I haven't even said what it is. So you don't have one. You don't have an ulnar collateral ligament in your throwing arm. This is mind-boggling, but I want to talk about that. I want you to talk about that, but tell everybody how that got initially discovered.
Well, the initial diagnosis happened from a picture on the cover of
That
Baseball America.
that's what I'm referring to.
Yeah, so I was part of the Olympic team in '96, and out of the University of Tennessee. I'd just been drafted in the first round by the Texas Rangers as a hard-throwing right-handed pitcher, out of the SEC, and we were on our Olympic tour, culminating in the Olympic Games in Atlanta. And before we went to Atlanta, they lined all the Olympic starters, the starting pitching staff across, and that was the cover of the Baseball America. And my arm in that photo was positioned in a way that caused alarm to the team physician for the Texas Rangers. And so after the Olympics were over and I had agreed in principle to my contract, which was for close to $1 million of signing bonus in 1996, which was a whole lot more money than I'd ever heard of, much less seen. I flew down for my physical, and that's when the discovery was made that I might have something wrong in my elbow. I had never been hurt a day in my life. I was quarterback in high school and had pitched a number of years in the college, and a number of innings, summer ball and all that stuff, and never missed a start, much less a bullpen. So I was really, really confused. But long story short, they found through a number of MRIs that I did not have the existence of a UCL, or an ulnar collateral ligament, in my right arm, and they couldn't believe it. They'd never seen it. I had doctors from all over the country calling me, wanting to do case studies on my arm, on why I was able to throw, and how could I, not have more collateral damage from the absence of that UCL in my elbow. I think the most painful thing, though, was the Texas Rangers revoked my signing bonus and said, "Hey, we don't even really want to sign you. You're damaged goods." And the deeper story there is that played on a lot of my history that I had not done work with. I didn't really come to terms with my sexual abuse or a lot of the stuff that had happened in my life until I was in my 30s. And so, I carried around a lot of weight from all that stuff. And this was another reminder that I was damaged and I'm broken. And, so that was the deeper story, underlying story that was going on internally. But, as far as baseball was concerned, the night before I was supposed to report back to the University of Tennessee for my senior year, if I were to have stepped foot in a classroom, I would have become ineligible for the draft until the following June. And so Doug Melvin, who actually was, I think, the general manager of the Sounds when Barney and I played together, he called with like 11 hours left before I had to leave for school, and said, "Hey, here's $75,000, take it or leave it," and an opportunity. And I got down on my knees and asked for counsel, and felt led to take it. And that was the beginning of my professional journey, was as this freak kind of guy who didn't have a UCL that was going to eventually break down, but had a chance. And that's kind of where I lived out of.
Even knowing the outcome of the book and having been privy to some of the stories I was going to read in it, I was still on pins and needles the whole time. I mean, it reads like fiction. And, you and I share something in common, or the old you and let's say the old me share something in common. We like to learn from our own poor decisions and bad experiences. A lot of our wounds were self-inflicted. We're going to get into you swimming across crazy rivers and all this sort of stuff. My dad always told me, the second best way to learn is from your own mistakes. The best way to learn is from someone else's.
Yeah.
But even whatever was self-inflicted or just brought onto you by outside influences and outside sources, was it baseball that prepared you and helped you get through those? Or because you had similar experiences in baseball, was it those experiences off the field that allowed you to triumph on the field?
Oh, I think undoubtedly it was the relational component, and not the vocational component, right? Like not the baseball. And now the baseball gave me a runway to live out some of the things I was learning. But if it weren't for the relational component between my wife and I, a really dear friend here locally that I was doing work with, friends, family, like embracing a new way to live as I was trying to get better from a lot of different stuff. If it wasn't for that, then, we wouldn't be talking. I probably wouldn't be here, to be honest.
Yeah.
I was suicidal on a bunch of different times in my life, unfortunately. But uh, it was that was really the catalyst. And most importantly, probably, Gates, is it was, you know, the relationship that started with God when I was in 7th grade. Like, as I was 13, just the embers of that were still burning deep in my heart. Now they hadn't yet become full flame at all, but at the time, like that was a saving grace. Like I did believe in that I was created in God's image, which really saved me a lot of different times. So yeah.
So two other big sort of pivotal moments of your life. We're going to talk about both, but I want to ask you where to go first. The transition to the knuckleball or the river?
Oh man, probably the transition to knuckleball. Just I
Okay,
think
so let me
chronologically it was
just
better.
yeah, let me just sort of tee this up. You're throwing gas, your whole career. You have this unbelievable story from college where you pitched like 11 innings in the College World Series or something like that. I mean, you're unstoppable, but something's fallen away. It's not working in the major leagues, and someone comes to you and says, you ought to try to learn this knuckleball pitch. And it in a world of glitz and glamour and chicks dig the long ball. I mean, everybody wants to throw heat. Nobody wants to throw these 60-mile-an-hour knuckleballs. They're funky. They're impossible. You got to manicure your nails a certain way. So you pick this pitch up, midway through your career, and it sort of writes the rest of the story, which we'll get into. But you were reluctant to do that, and it takes a level of humility for someone that had had all the success you had, been so successful at doing something their whole life, to say, "Okay, I'll try something brand new at this later stage in my baseball life and see how it works out." Walk us through that thought process.
Well, I think the place to start really is that I feel like is the place to start was in the manager's office. Buck Showalter, Oral Hershiser, and who was my pitching coach at the time, and the general manager. We were
I
all
mean,
in the
those are two like legendary names right there. I
yeah, they're
mean, Hall of
iconic
Fame guys.
names. Yeah, so they had called me in the office after a game against the Angels, in which I came out of the pen in relief as a conventional pitcher, like a fastball pitcher. But over time, over those 10 years of being a conventional pitcher, every spring training, just through general attrition, I think nothing was wrong with me necessarily, but my joint had expanded, my tissue had been like a rubber band stretched over time, over and over again. I just couldn't generate the velocities that I once could. And so, although I possessed some other things that helped me be a major leaguer as a conventional pitcher, I was very mediocre at, by my own admission. I mean, I wasn't very good at that level. And they knew it. They liked me as a teammate and a person, I think, and they could trust me. Like they could trust me to hold runners, trust me to field my position, trust me to know the bunt defenses. Like they could trust me. But as far as pure stuff goes, I was way down on the food chain at that time. And they called me in the office after I'd given up 3 or 4 runs and said, "Hey man, we know that you know this, but your numbers aren't very good, and we just don't think that there's really a pathway for you anymore as a conventional pitcher with our team." Um, but, and that conjunction was so important. I talk about it all the time. But we do think that you have a good knuckleball, and we want to give you a runway to be able to kind of practice that out in the minor leagues to see if you could be the next Tim Wakefield. At the time, Tim Wakefield was coming into Arlington and shutting them out. And Tim Wakefield was another knuckleballer who's a dear friend of mine. But he was the guy. And so they wanted me to be like him. So they said, "We'll give you an opportunity." And so I had to step back and really, like you said, be self-aware enough, I guess is the best way to put it, to understand that they were right. And that's hard to do. Like when you're a professional athlete, you want to go on that mound thinking you're the best that ever walked the earth. I mean, that's part of it. That bravado helps you have success because you're facing Vladimir Guerrero and Frank Thomas and all these guys that are incredible. And you've got to think that you're better than they are. And I had to let go of all that, right? Like I was in a place where I was at crisis, like this could be it. This could be the end of the only thing that had really ever brought me any validation as a human was sports, was baseball. And it was about to be taken away from me. So I wanted to prove myself, but I had to be aware enough in the moment to say, "Hey man, they're right. You're not who you once were. And you got to take your ego out of it and be excited about this next step, whatever that may look like." Now, I was not equipped to do that on my own. I mean, that was a Holy Spirit thing for me. Like that was God pushing me in that direction, saying, "Hey, I've got a different path for you. It's never going to look like you think it should look." Right. But here it is. And so I tried to embrace that. And I went down to AAA, and that was the beginning of my knuckleball experience, was going down to AAA, trying to figure it out on my own. My first outing, I gave up 10 runs. It was horrible. Had the worst outing of my life. I was thinking, what am I doing? Surely there's another team out there that would give me a chance, But over time, over the next few months of it being in the minor leagues, it got better and better and better. And that's kind of that was the beginning of the knuckleball journey, was 2006. 2005, really halfway up. And then 2006 was when I made the team the next year out of camp as a full-time knuckleballer, and gave up, the 6 home run game, which is, infamous. I tell everybody, when I go speak, they give me all these great accolades. Like like Barney's introduction was incredible. But I say, hey, you also have to remember, like I hold the record in the history of baseball for most home runs given up in a single game. I also hold the record for the most wild pitches in an inning. Like, so I have some really, really horrible records. So all that to say is, I think that for me, God always wants me in a place where I'm dependent. And if I feel like I'm getting outside of that dependency on him and the right perspective, then thankfully, I feel like he whips me back into the place I need to be. And he used baseball a number of times to do that.
Yeah, we're going to get into your faith, but I want to sort of stick on this human element. And I want to also say that there are so many inflection points in the book where I just expected it to be the end of that part of the story. Like you transitioned to the knuckleball, and I expected the book to kind of be the rest is history. And here we go to all these, Cy Young All-Star games and all that. But no, you give up 10 hits, you give up 6 home runs. Like you make this transition and like you're not very good at it at first. So it's doing like double time on your brain and your psychology to sort of figure out like, wait a minute, I wasn't the fastball pitcher anymore. I'm not even this guy right now. But you do talk about, you mentioned Tim Wakefield in the book. We can't go through life alone. as tough as we want to be. We need to surround ourselves with a human ecosystem, a support system to sort of lean on to get us through that. You talk about how Tim Wakefield pulled you to the side and, taught you how to work on your knuckleball. What competitor, on the opposing team does that? You spent hours with them in the bullpen before a game one time. We're going to get into, your wife. I mean, throughout the whole book, there were always people there to sort of come along the way with you. Talk about those relationships and how important they
Oh
were.
man, golly, yeah, that's a 10-hour conversation. But as far as the knuckleball goes, I was alone in it. Really, there's not really a pitching. You can't turn to a pitching coach and say, "Hey man, help me with my knuckleball." I mean, they've never walked a mile in your shoes when you're trying to do that. And basically, just for the audience, when you become a knuckleballer, you're unlearning everything that you learned as a conventional pitcher since you've been 8 years old and trying to relearn a mechanic that can produce a baseball that spins a quarter of a revolution from the time it leaves your hand till the time it gets to the plate. That is an incredibly difficult endeavor. And
Alright, is that what it is? A quarter of a revolution on average?
like a good one for
Wow.
me would rotate. Literally, you could read the writing on the baseball as it came at you.
Oh my
And so it would
gosh.
try to turn over just a quarter of a revolution. So I had to try to produce that 100 times a game. Like that was the quest. And I could throw a good one just playing catch with my buddy, which is why Oral Hershiser and Buck Showalter said, "Hey man, we think you might could do this." They saw my catch partner missing balls and it hitting him in the knee and moving all over the place. But I'd never thrown it competitively in a game. So when I went down to AAA, man, I was lost puppy, and I I just didn't know what to do or how to do it or how to pitch with it, all the nuances that come with competing with it at that level against the best hitters in the world. Like, it's hard. And so my first phone call was to Charlie Huff. And Charlie Huff was an old-time knuckleballer who had many, many years in the big leagues. And he helped me a little bit with my grip. And then I met with Tim Wakefield, and Tim Wakefield helped me a little bit with my mechanic. And then I went down to see Phil Necro, and Phil Necro is like the Yoda, right? Like he's like those were if that's the Jedi Council of guys that I would lean on, he was the Yoda, man. 300 game winner, Hall of Famer, and so sweet as a man, just to work with me and ask for nothing in return. So relationally, that was important for me. He helped introduce a component in my mechanic that really helped turn the tide for me too. So all these men together poured into me so selflessly. And like you said with Tim, I was playing for Seattle and I went in to watch Boston Red Sox we were playing the Boston Red Sox. He was throwing a bullpen and he sent the clubhouse guy over to me and said, "Hey man, do you want to come watch my bullpen? You might pick up a thing or two." And I could not believe it that a guy who was trying to beat my team would invite me over and introduce me to ways that might beat his team. Just mind blowing. And those are the kind of relationships as far as knuckleballing goes that were so valuable for me. Those three men if it weren't for them, I would have never, I say all the time when I won the Cy Young, it was not a win for me. It was a win for, all of us that had tried to throw in a pitch. And it's real lonely. It's kind of like, people don't know what to think of you. You're like that circus freak on the side with, that has horns growing out their head. And they're like, "Hey, come see this thing," that because it's so different. Like Tim was the only one at the time that did it. And then I came and I was the only one of one, like you said, in the major leagues for, the next 12 years for me. And so it was difficult. You didn't have many people to lean on. And thankfully, God had brought alongside men who not only knew the craft, but were willing to communicate it in a way that was so selfless and so uh, just giving away of themselves over and over. They were like, I would send video to these guys. They would call me after outing and say, "Hey man, I saw where your front side was leaking. You need to get back on track here. Your hand position's here, should be there." Unprompted. Like they cared, right? They were super caring. And so for me, that was a real game changer, relationally as far as my vocation was concerned. Of course, you alluded to it, but I had amazing relationships outside of the game that really helped grow me in a way that had nothing to do with baseball, but the overflow of that growth made me a better baseball player because I was able to hold where baseball in its proper place, right? Right. I was like this for so long with baseball. Like, this is who I am. This is my identity. If I don't make it, I'm a failure, blah, blah, blah. And as I started meeting these people who poured into me in a way that was really incredible, my grip started loosening and baseball became what it should be. And that's just a gift God had given me to give away. And so like, and I wanted to do that the best I could all the time. So I worked at it relentlessly, as you might have read about in the book. But at the same time, it did not define me as a human being in a way that it once had. And that was the mechanism for me that changed the course and trajectory of my marriage, the way I was a father, the way I treated my parents, the way I did relationship with other men and women. And it was a real gift.
Changing from, throwing a fastball to throwing a knuckleball, you're playing the same sport, but it's almost like you're at a whole different position or a whole different job. It would be like working at a finance company and they want you to go from the sales department to the IT department. It's like, I'm working for the same company, but it is not the same job. And you're having to sort of relearn everything on the fly, drinking through a fire hose. And in your situation, no one to train you. I mean, at least when you go from the sales to the IT department, there's going to be some manager over there that can sort of train you into that role. Not for you. And it's funny you mentioned the sort of culture around other knuckleballers. It's like a small club. I remember reading in the book you talking about that night after Tim Wakefield, was so generous with you in the bullpen, you were rooting for him. You wanted your team to win, but you're like, he's a knuckleballer. I hope he does well, but I want the team to win maybe by like 1 run in a low
That's
scoring
right.
game. So
1-0.
I thought that was funny. So for me, and I think it was intended this way, but maybe not. For me, the climax of the book was the river. It sort of seemed like everything in your life came to a head in this river. Chris Barnwell is going to charge me for mentioning his name so many times in this episode. This episode's brought to you by Chris Barnwell, but he was there for that. Okay, he's our mutual friend. He was there for that, so I got to read it in the book and then get a firsthand account from him. So I'm not going to even get into the story. I want you to tell the story about what happened in the river because it was sort of this, I'm making a deal with God when this was
Oh
all
boy.
over.
Yeah. Well, I got to give some props to Barney real quick before we start, because he tried, like he's the only one that called my wife. He was the only one that said, "Hey man, you should not do this. You should not try this." So I appreciated him for that. But anyway, so I was at a place, just to give you some context, I was in AAA with the Nashville Sounds, and I was trying to make it back in 2007 as a knuckleball pitcher. So I spent 2005 and 2006 really kind of just thumping through, surviving, trying to make it work. It was good enough some days. It was horrible other days. I just wasn't very consistent. But the Nashville Sounds gave me an opportunity. And it was at a time when I had really come to terms with a lot of my personal stuff and I was in therapy with a great counselor. Like had great relationships. I was getting poured into by my pastor of my church, and like it was just a sweet, sweet time. I was working on my marriage with another, like a marital counselor, which was incredible. And so all these things were happening in 07, and this is incredible. And to talk about the climax of the story, yes, you're right, but this was even a bigger climax because it was a behind the scenes, and I might not have even talked about it in the book, but I live in Nashville. And so the only place on earth where I could do all of those things in the moment that I was doing them together was in Nashville. So although I wanted to make the Milwaukee Brewers big league team, I didn't. So I was in AAA with the Nashville Sounds, which was 10 minutes from my house, and it allowed me to keep working on the things that were most important: my marriage, my faith, my personal growth, like all that stuff. And the knuckleball platform of being able to, like, hey, come be a pitcher for the Nashville Sounds, that was completely secondary at this moment in my life. Now, what's important about that is, it was the only offer that I had that offseason. I had one offer. It was from the Milwaukee Brewers, whose AAA was in the Nashville Sounds, And so God,
And all
like,
right, that's where your family is currently living at this stage in your
yeah,
life, wife and kids.
I was born and raised here. We would always make this my headquarters, no matter where I was playing
Got it.
with the Rangers, Mets, it didn't matter. Like, we would always come back here. My support staff was here. Like, my wife's support staff was here. Our kids were going to school here, and I was able to drive to the park 10 minutes away, sleep in my own bed that night, and continue with the things that I had committed to, in my personal story. And so all that was happening. But my Like, it's not like that was a magic pill. All of a sudden, my knuckleball started doing great things. I started the year with the Nashville Sounds 1-6 with like a 6.5 ERA. Horrible. And I thought, I'm going to be released any moment. But there was a part of me in the past that would have been heartbroken, depressed. Like, I was like, okay, what's next? Like, okay, this might be part of the journey. I've just got to trust it. But meanwhile, I was continuing to get opportunities to work my craft and to do what God I felt like had called me to do in that moment. So I would show up to work 100%. I'd get after it, but I felt in my spirit like I was moments away from being released. We go to Omaha, and we always stay in this boat right on the river. It's a casino boat, and they let you gamble there, and we have rooms there that's connected, and guys go down and spend their per diem down there on blackjack and everything else. But I had gone there for years and years, Gates, like with other minor league teams, playing the Omaha Royals, the AAA affiliate of the Kansas City Royals. And I had where the hotel is positioned is right on the Missouri River. And I would always go up those elevators looking into the Missouri thinking, and this was years in the making, thinking, I think I could swim across that. I think I can swim across that river. And I would tell my teammates, and they would be like, you're an idiot. Like, there's no way you can swim across that. And I was a good swimmer. Like, I grew up swimming, like, wasn't afraid of the water, loved the water. And I was at a point in my career right then where I was 1-6 with like a 6.5, 7 ERA. And I thought, man, I might never be back here. I'm going to do it. I'm going to try to swim across. And I was going up with Barney. I said, man, I'm going to do it. Get the guys together. They're going to want to see this. Like, meanwhile, I had no idea about the Missouri River. I didn't know it was like the dirtiest river in the world. I didn't know it was like the strongest current. I didn't know anything about that. So I just would see, people on their boats going down the river, and floating at high rates of speed without their motor, by the way, like boats zooming by without even the motor on. So I should have recognized that, hey man, the current's really, really strong. Anyway, they did it. They were so excited to watch me, watch me drown out there. Like, like this is going to be a spectacle. We don't want to miss it. And so I got
Tell
them
them about the
together.
flip-flops.
Oh my, yeah. And so the rocks to get into the river were like this riprap. So it was real pointy, jaggedy rocks. I didn't want to cut the bottom of my feet. So I went to the gift shop downstairs in this hotel, and I got a roll of duct tape, and I got some flip-flops. I was like, I'm gonna just duct tape these flip-flops around my foot so I don't cut my foot, and I can swim with them like little flippers. Well, I got down to the bank, and I was like, okay, all of a sudden this river feels like it's, going at 200 miles an hour. Like, it's much bigger and like more intimidating than it ever was at a crow's nest view from the elevator looking down on it. And I'm thinking, man, maybe I can't do this. But I was already committed, man. I was like, if I'm not going to be a good baseball player, I'm going to be a legend for something. I'm going to be known for something, right? Like, what an idiot. Like, I'm going to, I'm going to swim across Missouri, and if I'm released tomorrow, at least I'll be a good story, like I will have made it across the Missouri River. Well, I started out, and the current wasn't near as quick close to the banks. It was much more quick in the middle, but I knew there was a current. So I walked about 300, like 3 or 4 football fields up, kind of west, so that I would be able to cross as I was getting pulled down on the other side, closer to my hotel, I thought. Well, as I was pedaling out, man, I was swimming and swimming and swimming, had my head down swimming. They were all on the veranda watching. I put my head up just to figure out where I was, because I was getting a little bit tired. I thought, man, maybe I'm halfway there already, and I was about a quarter way there, Gates, and the current had already evened me up with the hotel. And I thought, okay, well, I'm going to put my head down. I'm going to go real hard for a little while longer. As I got closer and closer to the middle of the Missouri, the current, both undercurrent and current, like moving downstream, was worse and worse and worse, but I couldn't really feel it. And so I got tired, thought I got to about the middle of it. And I started poking up and tread water, and I looked around and I couldn't see anybody. Like, I didn't know where I was. I was so far by the hotel. And as I was treading water, the undercurrent started getting into the space between the bottom of my foot and the flip-flop and pulling me under. And so I had a decision to make now. Like I was either going to try to get to the other side, which was an, an impossible task, or tuck tail and try to get back to the bank that I came from. Either way, like I thought in my spirit, like this could be it. Like I'm getting tired. I can't tread anymore. Like my shoulders are burning. I'm zooming down and being pulled under. And so I thought, well, I'm going to just try to make it back to the bank. So I put my head down and I was swimming. And as I was swimming, like lactic acid started to swell up in my joints. I started to like see spikes. I was done. I was out. And I thought, this is how it's going to end. Like somebody's going to have to call my wife and tell her that her husband died in the Missouri River trying to swim across it like an idiot. And it was the most horrible feeling. And so I finally got to the space where I was like, man, I can't do it anymore. And I would swim underwater because I felt like I didn't have to battle the top current. And then I'd come up for a breath, look around for a second and like go underwater and swim and come up for a breath. And I was moving like this much at a time, I felt like. And finally I did that one more time. I said, I can't do it anymore. I'm just going to let it take me down. And I'll never forget the feeling as long as I live. Like I just kind of gave up and started submerging under the water and letting the undercurrent pull me under and thinking, this is horrible. I remember explaining it in the book, the sensation of weeping underwater. Like that
Yep,
to
I
me,
remember
like
that.
it was horrible. And so it was taking me, I took one deep breath, let it take me down. And all of a sudden my feet, it must have taken, I could hear my ears were popping and stuff. So I thought, man, I'm pretty deep now. It's about over. I'm about to open my mouth and just take in water and let it be over. And my feet hit the bottom of the clay Missouri. And I thought, well, maybe I can just push up. And so any strength I had, I used to push up, and I pushed up and did one like breaststroke, and I could get to the top to get another air. And I started bouncing off the bottom and doing that as I got closer to shore, maybe with a little bit of this underwater, but it gave me a little bit of hope when I hit the ground, when I hit the riverbed. Meanwhile, I was way down from the hotel, and I thought, well, somebody's going to, I don't know how I'm going to get to the bank. Well, there was this outstretched arm that hung out into the Missouri River, about seemingly a half mile down from our hotel. And as I got up one time, I looked down and I saw, it looked like a sewage pipe that it was sticking out into the water about 15 feet from the bank, 20 feet from the bank. And I got to the top and I saw a guy on it that was looking at me and like holding out his arm. Like he knew I was in trouble. And it turned out that guy was Grant Balfour, a guy who was on our team. He was a closer. He was from Australia. He knew I was in trouble from the get-go, and he had run alongside the bank down to me, thinking that I may be in trouble. And he, climbed fences, got to the other, like he was having to traverse things to get to this. And it was my only hope. If I missed this arm, it was probably going to be over. And so he was out there and had a hooked arm, and with my last push, I was able to reach up and he hooked my arm and pulled me to the bank. And, it was incredible relief and every sensation you could imagine when you feel like you're going to die and you don't, I mean, I don't want to be cliche, but it was overwhelming. I was filthy. Like I was in my underwear, like my tighty whities and a tank top, a white tank top. They were both black as night because of how dirty that river is. I thought I was going to, grow a third ear or something, eventually because of the toxicity in that stinking river. But anyway, I got to the bank and I was like, Lord, I'm so sorry. Like all I could do is be contrite, just, I'm so sorry I tried something like that. And I just, I felt this peace come over me, like, hey man, I'm still here. Like, I'm still here. And I could barely walk back to the hotel because I was so exhausted and tired. I eventually had to get myself ready. This is the thing that's most incredible after this is that I got myself ready to go to the game. I was exhausted. I got there no way I was going to pitch. Like, no way. We had one of our best starters going, like I didn't even think about pitching. I was down in the bullpen, laying down in the bullpen because I was so exhausted for the night game versus the Royals in my full uniform. And everybody, like the word had circulated. Everybody knew what I'd been through, even the coaches. And next thing you know, phone rings. Hey, get Dickey up. And so I go in the game in like the 4th inning and throw like 4 shutout innings. I went into Missouri 1-6 with like an 8. I finished the year 10-1 with like a 2 from the Missouri forward and became the PCL, which is the Pacific Coast League AAA pitcher of the year. And it was like you said, it was a climax in a lot of different ways, right? Like, yes, physically, like my life was saved on that day, by somebody and by the Lord, thankfully. And also vocationally, like just this surrender to like, what am I doing? Like that was like the last straw for me in holding this tightly to something that had zero value. Like, why would I want to be building a legend for myself, or why would I want to be trying to be known for something, like so silly and stupid. And so that was the Missouri story.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, RA, like I listened to your book. I read books sometimes listen to them, and I listened to yours, and I listen to books on 1.5 speed. When that story came up, I slowed it down to normal speed because it was so intense in the book, and it was just intense here and now. It's like my heart's racing, and I know the outcome, and we can laugh about it and
Yeah,
all
right.
that, but it was for me the climax of the book, and you touched on it here, your faith. This sort of seemed like the climax of that as well. Maybe it wasn't, but you sorta faith is intertwined throughout the book, but it sort of enters the picture throughout this story. What was that journey like with your faith? Because I know, now, and your faith has always been pretty strong. Now it's very strong and all that, but mine's strong too. But that doesn't mean it doesn't sort of go through evolutions throughout my life of times where I'm questioning things and wondering things and all that. What's your faith journey been like throughout your whole, let's just say, career?
Okay. So, well, thank you for that question. You know, there's a line in a song. I don't know if you're a Zach Bryan fan, but he's a country music singer.
Oh
And
yeah. Oh yeah.
he's got a line in a song that says, you die 10,000 times before you become who you are. Like there's a line in one of it. And that's kind of how that's been my story, right? Like I've either should have been dead or felt like I've died figuratively, 1,000 times, before I'm here. And the truth is, Gates, like, you know, and this is even a hope. Like I want to die 100 more times if it helps sanctify me this side of the curtain, right? Like if it helps grow me to my full capacity as a human being, I want to die 100 more times to myself. Um, but my faith is, I came to know Christ when I was 13, and ironically, it was my wife's brother that led me to Christ. And it was, like I said, they were just small embers that were planted in the moment, but I certainly invited them into my life in a time when, I felt like the world was crumbling down around me, and it in that moment was a saving grace. But in my career, I went from thinking I knew a lot to thinking I knew a little, and then thinking I knew a lot, and then thinking I knew a little. I feel like it's like the book of Judges, right? Like the Israelites were always doing what was right in their own eyes, right? That was me. Like I was always doing right with what I thought was right, but without a real dependency on God, or a real, being still and searching out what He may have for me. And it took me, a long time. It's taking me, like, I am not, like, I don't have it all figured out. Like, please don't hear that. Like, I am an unfinished work, and will be, but I do hunger now to really go deeper and be more intimate and try to put into practice the things that I feel like I have been taught and saved from. And, um, the pain that I've lived through, which He has helped comfort me in. Like all those things I want to take, I want to cultivate and give them away, because that's what He constantly is asking His disciples to do. Right. And so that's what I want to do as well. But, it's just, it gets back to the thing, Gates, man, like just relationally, it's relationships that grow people. Relationships with a father, sure, but relationships with your brothers and sisters in Christ, failures in relationship, Like I was a horrible husband and father for a long time in my life, just because for a lot of different reasons. Like some our own choosing, right? Like you said at the beginning, absolutely. And some from just, uh, you know, your own personal life experience. My parents were divorced when I was real young. I didn't have a male role model that modeled for me how to treat a woman. I didn't know what that was like, how to do that well. I could watch movies, I could see it in other families, but I never lived it up. And I was certainly a product of that as well. So you know, to answer your question in short, my faith is thankfully still growing, I feel like, but it certainly has been the sustaining benchmark in my whole life, like everything is bounced on and off of that, uh, in a way that has been very valuable and made my life very rich, even though it's been very painful.
Yeah, faith is sort of, for us believers, kind of the compass that sort of guides and directs our life. And you talk about being an unfinished work. I mean, I think we're all unfinished works until God calls us to the heaven, to the kingdom of heaven. And
Mhm,
so I'm walking that journey with you. And so you bring up Anne, your wife, and you
mhm.
nothing you don't say in the book. You had a extramarital affair there. We don't necessarily need to go into specifics of that, but you she comes up in almost every chapter, whether it's baseball, marriage, family life, whatever. And so it's very clear that your relationship with her, other than maybe your relationship with God, is the most important thing in your life. She stood by you through a lot, suicidal thoughts as an adult.
Oh, yeah.
And so did writing the book change y'all's relationship? Like what effect did writing the book have on your marriage?
Oh, man, what a great question. I think it did change our marriage because I wanted to be fair to everybody I talked about in the book, right? Like, so when I proposed this idea to my wife, you know, rightfully so, she had a lot of questions and should have. But her faith is unbelievable, Gates, too, and a motivator for me. And when she heard me say that I felt like God was asking me to do it despite what I really wanted to do, I think she understood that it was something that was inevitable. And she wanted to be a part of it in a big way, and she couldn't help but be because she's that big a part of my life. But we walked through a lot of counseling together, before the book was ever published, which really deepened our relationship in a way that probably it couldn't otherwise. And also, like, there's not a page in that book that went without her eyes reading it. And so she was able to give me real valuable feedback from, a woman's intuition's pretty unbelievable, in a way that really helped make it a really, really good book too, I think. But you know, I made a lot of mistakes, man, a lot of mistakes. And I think the thing that I felt I saw my wife live out in our marriage is this not only this empathy to a story that I had that I did not even bring her into until I was in my 30s, which was a betrayal in and of itself. Like for her to not know who I really was, sexually abused, like the things I was dealing with. Like she married a man that was a stranger. I could pretend real well, which was part of my charisma to her, was like I could fake it. I was really good at faking it and protecting myself and surviving so I could project to you what I wanted you to see. But all the while, it was a big facade, right? And she married that facade. And so that was an act of betrayal, even at the beginning. Uh, but as we traversed life together, and I got to know her more intimately, and when I went through my stuff, and she got to know me on a deeper level, it just allowed for so much. It's just so much more rich, like for somebody to know the worst things about you and still be willing to love you. That changes you. Right? That changes you. That's what Christ did. That's what she was doing. She modeled that to perfection for me in a way that I didn't think was possible. And so I felt like if I told anybody about my sexual abuse, they were going to throw their hands up and want nothing to do with me, run the other way. Like you're hideous. You like I say it in the book, you feel less than human when you deal with stuff like that. And I thought that's what my wife would do if I ever told her about that. Now, that was a gross assumption on my part. I didn't even give her the chance until I was 32 years old. But when I did, it was, it moved the stars in a way that no other thing could.
So that's your wife,
Hmm.
and
And
that's another adult. That's your partner. No, no, no. I know. That's Anne. So
Yeah.
but you have kids. You have kids,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
the luxury that I have is I'm not writing a book about all the things I've gone through in my life, and so I will be able to introduce those stories to my kids at the time that I choose.
Hmm.
You've written this book, you have 4 kids. What's that dynamic like, them knowing all this stuff? How do you talk to them about this?
It's been there's been a real neat dynamic that has occurred. And even unknowingly to me, in the time I was writing the book, I felt like, I was being obedient to God by writing the book. I did not know how it would impact. I have 4 kids, 2 girls at the top, which are older, and 2 boys at the bottom. And I did not realize in time how it would impact them because their peers would read the book. Like my book was
Mhm.
actually a class read. And so that's tough. That's hard, right? Like, and so they would oftentimes come home with questions. Now, I never wanted, there's so much in the book. I could not possibly probably get to every single detail of the book with them before they were going to be introduced to it some other way. But what it did was create this incredible environment in our home where nothing was off limits. Not pornography, not, you know, I mean, all things, all manner of things that are so hard to talk about in our culture, drinking, drugs, masturbation, like pornography, like all these, like dirty words that aren't, that's just an arrow in the enemy's quiver, man. Like I'm so sick of that crap. Like the greatest tool he has is to convince people he doesn't exist, right? So it's like, we want to talk about these things that are hard. So when they are introduced to you in a teenage setting or in a social setting, or like you have equipment to deal with it. And a lot of that equipment came through talking about the book. Like, what does this look like? Or what happens to a human when they're sexually abused? How can you sit with that person that might be your friend that has endured that in a way that can comfort them? Like what does it look like when a man is unfaithful to his wife, and how do you recover from that? And what is the reconciliation to that? And, why did that happen? And why, like all these things, uh, are being talked about. Now there's obviously fallout from that. Like there's resentment and there's all these emotions that they have their rights to as kids looking at their parents. But I can't be afraid of those things. Like I've got to embrace those things. I've got to own what is mine to own, and I've got to be apologetic for it and repent of it. Nobody that hears this does a more of a favor for their child when they catch themselves doing something wrong and go to them in a true act of repentance. No, nobody does more of a favor for their child than that. Like, so I would oftentimes go to them and say, "Hey, I am so sorry that I ever did that," or "I'm so sorry that I raised my voice to you in front of people. I'm so sorry that I did that to your mother. I'm so sorry that I wasn't there for you all those years I played Major League Baseball and you were going to things by yourself. I am so sorry." Like, to give them the gift of that is giving them the gift of empathy and, you know, soft-heartedness and all the things. And I'm not saying that as a humble brag. I'm just saying that's just an overflow of your question. Like, that's what the book did for us as a family, is it created a culture within our home where we could talk about hard things. Nothing was off limits, and they knew they weren't gonna be judged at the end of it. And because of that, they had the freedom to make mistakes and get better from them. And yes, there comes responsibility and consequences with those mistakes, but nothing outside the framework of your mom and I's love for you and you being able to make another mistake, because that's life.
Yeah, you're providing for your kids what you didn't have at their age in your life, that father figure. And so many times in society, when someone doesn't have a father figure, it just sort of matriculates down, generation after generation. And you sort of buck that trend by saying, no, I'm going to use my lived experiences to make my children's lives better through my example. So 2 more questions, RA. The knuckleball. It's quirky. It's incredibly hard to master. Few do. Um, it's nearly impossible to hit, but man, when the opponent gets a hold of it, it's damn near a home run almost every time.
That's true.
Is the pitch almost symbolic of your life?
Oh yeah, man. There's no doubt. Like that like irony is not lost on God, man. I mean, he's got a great sense of humor. If you can if you can see it that way. I mean, the ups and downs of my life compared to the, like, as a metaphor for a knuckleball, which, is constantly moving around and is a moving target. All of that is such a sweet metaphor for kind of my path as a human being. And, I will always see it as art, like I just feel like, my hope in the beginning was to survive. And as I got more of God and more of what I felt like this pitch was, I wanted to be like a real craftsman with it. Like, how do I do this with it? How do I make it move here? And then ultimately for me is this hope that I can become an artist with it. Right. So I wanted to go from survivor to craftsman to artist. Right. How can I paint a picture here with what I have, with my gift, whatever that is? How can I paint a picture with it where I can feel good about it? And so that was my journey.
Yes,
But yeah, and the knuckleball allowed
with
me
that,
to, that was my
I
paintbrush, if
agree.
you will, right? Like is that knuckleball.
Yeah, a conversation for another episode is the manicuring habits,
Oh
that
boy.
knuckleballers have to go through. We'll leave that on the table.
Okay, good
Um,
one.
so I see another metaphor. I see sort of AAA and your experience there as a metaphor for life. Maybe a takeaway, or a relatable moment for our listeners, that are stuck in the AAA of life. They're on the cusp of greatness. They're in their career or their parenting phase of their life where they sort of have all the tools, all the resources. The margins of error are so thin, and they're trying to get to the big leagues. What sort of which was your journey? What sort of advice do you have for people that are sort of in that AAA phase of their life?
Oh man, that's a good question, but I think it's a hard answer. Uh, and that the hard answer is that um, the AAA phase of your life may be your big league experience. So what I mean to say is, like, not everybody's meant to be a big league baseball player, right? Like, that's just part of life. And you got to help kids understand that from an early age, vocationally. Like, less than 1% of humanity ever gets an opportunity to play baseball at a major league level. So when you're using that metaphor, my advice is, like, there are ways to make your AAA experience a big league experience. Like, that's the fight worth fighting, is no matter where you are in your journey, how do I make that piece of my journey the best it can be? Now, when I was going through counseling, one of the most valuable lessons I learned, and here's a free $1,000 lesson for you. Uh, like, if you can make it a life discipline to live the next 5 minutes well, then you will feel at the end of the day like you have contributed to society, that you have gotten better as a person, that you have been a good friend, you have been a good husband. Like, if you can break it down to living in the moment well, how do you do that well and make that a life discipline? What does that mean for you? Like, write it down, meditate over it, pray over it. Um, you can make any experience, whether it's single A experience or triple A experience, a big league experience. And that's I think one of the things in our culture that's so backwards is everybody's trying to step on everybody else's neck to get to where they want to go, man. And that is not God's design. God's design is for you to have this thing that he's given you and you to make it the best it can possibly be. If I would have never gotten out of AAA, I could have still had a major league experience in AAA chasing that thing that I felt like God had given me to chase, and doing it well, not mistreating people, encouraging others in the face of them being promoted over me. Like, like, what does that mean to live it well? And then how do you reduce that from a 24-hour period into 5-minute segments? And how do you make that a life discipline? When I did that, man, a lot of things changed for me in a big way, because I was less overwhelmed by the macro, and all I cared about was like the micro. And the macro ended up taking care of itself, and it will if you can consume yourself with the micro. Does that make sense?
Man, it makes total sense, and it's great advice, and I love little sound bites to live the next 5 minutes of your life and all that sort of stuff. I have a Post-it on my computer monitor that says, "Do one thing every day that compounds," and the
Oh,
power of
that's awesome.
compounding is
Yeah.
is is so simple, but so powerful, and it's small acts done over and over that lead to great things. And the
Yeah.
AAA answer that you had for life is awesome. So I lied. I have one more question.
Yeah.
We see that you had the beard and the salad when you played, but that's a bushy beard. Tell everybody what you're up to these days.
Well, and I retired in 2017, but before I did, I I bought a small farm up on a hill in Franklin, Tennessee, and that's the bulk of my time is spent here at the farm or trying to overcompensate for missing all my kids' stuff and being a part of their lives. I know my kids sometimes, especially my sons, are like, "Get out of here, man. Like you've already, you've speaking of compounding, you've compounded your time so much. I'm sick of you." But I just want to be a, full-time father and husband the best I can. And I also work for I'm on the board of directors with a 501(c) here locally that's dear to my heart, called the Nashville Anti-Human Trafficking Coalition. It's a space I've been involved in for quite some time, just because I share a similar wound with a lot of the women that we rescue. Not the same stories, obviously, but similar wounds. And it's been a real privilege to get to do that. So all that together, man, we got, we're out here building gardens here. I'm going to get off with you and go try to plant some broccoli. So, see what's next.
Well, we'll let you get to the broccoli planting. In a society that is critical or it seems to want to criticize masculinity, I don't think there's anything more masculine than being vulnerable, being honest, and being faithful in God. And you've done all those things. You're the embodiment of that. So I thank you for your example. I will share it with my kids to help them grow in their life. And thanks for coming on We the People, RA.
No, man, I had a great time, Gates. Great questions, man. Thank you.
We the people. Why you quiet? It's time to stand up for the truth. And they coming for our kids, so who gon' stand up for the youth? Ay, and we know we win because Yeshua is the proof. Ay, we the people like Gates Garcia, so that's no excuse.